Back in the winter of 1883, when the sky stretched wider than most dreams and the land still whispered with wild freedom, a young woman stepped off a train with hope burning in her chest. Her name was Clara Mae Jenkins, a seamstress from Illinois, with strong hands and warm eyes, the kind of beauty shaped by sunrises and sorrow. Some called her sturdy, others whispered about her generous figure. But Clara was like a sunflower in full bloom, golden, tall, unashamed. She wasn't delicate, she wasn't small, she was vivid, alive, and entirely herself. She held a letter in her gloved hand, creased and worn from countless readings. Jedediah Turner, a rancher from Dry Creek, Wyoming, had written it, promising land, a home, partnership, love. He hadn't said much about appearances. Clara liked that. It made her feel, maybe, just maybe, she was enough. She sold everything she had, her sewing table, her mama's dishes, even the lace curtains she'd hemmed by hand. With nothing but her mother's quilt, a sewing kit, and a single trunk, Clara boarded a train heading west. She carried no riches, only a name, a promise, and a heart stitched full of stars. Clara's boots crunched through the snow as she walked away from the barn, now just a shadow in the swirling white. Her heart had cracked, but she didn't break. Not then, not yet. She had nowhere to go, but she went anyway, toward the train station, toward the only thing familiar. But there was no return ticket, no plan, just a silence so deep it swallowed her. The town lay still, and she sat alone beside the tracks, snow falling heavy, her shawl soaked, her hands numb. She cried quietly. No gasping sobs, just the slow unraveling of a heart dropped in the wrong place. And when she could no longer feel her fingers, she stood, not because she knew what came next, but because sitting there wasn't living. She picked up her trunk and walked deeper into Dry Creek, a ghost among muddy streets and wooden buildings, her boots soaked through, her spirit trembling, but not gone. At the far end of town, she found a room to rent above the apothecary, small, slanted, barely warm. But it was hers. She paid 2 weeks up front with the last of her sewing money. Then, thread by thread, she began to stitch herself a new life. She offered mending to strangers, patched worn coats and trousers. In baked pies, she bartered for flour. She didn't ask for pity, and she told no tales. But the whispers came, the mail-order bride who was turned away. Poor thing, shame about her figure. Clara held her chin high, her lips pressed like stitches. She wasn't made to bend. She was built to endure. Most days, Clara kept to herself. She didn't seek sympathy, only space. But slowly, life began to stitch itself back together, thread by thread. She found quiet allies. Mrs. Pickens at the bakery, who traded day-old loaves for sugar stitching. The blacksmith's wife, who brought gingham and kindness. But it was the general store that changed everything. Dry Creek's general store was where the town's heartbeat lived. Ribbons, nails, flour, gossip, all under one roof. Clara began stopping in mid-mornings, basket on her arm, her steps hesitant at first. That's where she noticed him. Eli Cartwright, tall, soft-spoken, spectacles perched on his nose. He didn't shout. He didn't stare. He simply moved with quiet purpose behind the counter. And one day, as she paid for green thread, he asked, "You like to read?" She blinked, surprised. "Romances mostly," she said softly. "Lately, I've needed happy endings." Eli nodded with the softest smile. "I might have a few tucked away you'd enjoy." And that was how it began. Week by week, their conversations grew. Never too long, never too forward. Just enough to warm the air between them like spring sun on snow. Eli never asked about Jedediah, never whispered the gossip that followed Clara like dust. He just looked at her like she was a story still being written, one he wanted to keep reading. Soon, Clara found herself stopping by even when she didn't need anything. For buttons, for fabric, for a moment near the counter. And every time, Eli stood a little taller, smiled a little softer. One chilly morning, Clara brought him a cranberry tart tied with ribbon. "This is too kind," he said, eyes wide. She only smiled. "Kindness isn't meant to be measured, Mr. Cartwright." He looked at her then, not shyly, not quickly, just truly, like he saw what no one else had taken the time to see. That moment, small as it was, felt like turning a page he thought was long closed. Their talks deepened, gently. Eli asked if she missed Illinois. She asked about his late wife. They shared without fear. One afternoon, as Clara turned to leave, he spoke softly. "This place feels different when you're here." She smiled, held the warmth of his words under her shawl, and walked home through the melting snow with something like hope in her heart again. Spring began to tease the edges of Dry Creek. Snow melted into rivulets along dirt roads. Windows cracked open to let in the thaw, and in her tiny upstairs room above the apothecary, Clara worked by candlelight, night after night. She was stitching a quilt. Her mother's old one had crossed 1,000 miles with her, faded and worn, stitched with the hands of generations. But now Clara added her own squares. A piece of gingham from the bakery apron, a patch from her shawl, a sliver of fabric that matched the ribbon Eli once admired. Each piece a memory, each square a new start. When it was finished, she folded it gently, wrapped it in brown paper, and carried it through town with trembling hands. Inside the general store, Eli looked up. "Miss Jenkins," he said, curious. Clara placed the bundle on the counter and said simply, "I have something for you." He unfolded the quilt slowly, his hands brushing across the careful stitching. "You made this?" Clara nodded. "It was my mama's, but I added to it. Thought maybe it could keep your chair warm." Eli looked at her, really looked, his voice low. "No one's ever given me something like this." She smiled. "Well, no one's ever made me feel safe enough to." Then Eli stepped around the counter and took her hand, not quickly, not boldly, just surely. "You are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." And in that moment, Clara finally believed it. The spring harvest dance was the kind of event that brought everyone out, even those who claimed they were too old or too tired. The schoolhouse was strung with paper lanterns, fiddles tuning under a sky painted pink and gold. Clara arrived alone, wearing a soft lilac dress she had sewn by hand, cream buttons glinting at her collar, her hair pinned back, her lips touched with rose balm. She told herself she came only to watch the children twirl, to hear the laughter, to feel part of something. But Eli had other plans. He stood by the punch table, crisp shirt ironed, quiet as ever. And the moment he saw her, he walked straight toward her. "Miss Jenkins," he said, bowing just enough. "Would you dance with me?" Clara blinked, surprised. "Are you sure?" "Very sure." She placed her hand in his and the room faded away. They danced, not perfectly but honestly, step by step, breath by breath. All that mattered was the way he looked at her, like no one ever had. Later under the stars he whispered, "I never expected to find love here." "You didn't just look at me," she whispered back. "You saw me." And when he kissed her, it was quiet, steady, and sure. A kiss that said, "You are home." A year later, under a blooming dogwood tree behind the general store, they married. Clara wore cream lace she stitched herself. Eli's hands trembled, but his eyes stayed fixed on hers. They danced barefoot in the grass as lanterns swayed above them. A woman who had crossed winter and heartbreak had become someone new, without changing who she was. So if the world ever tells you that you are too much or not enough, remember Clara Mae Jenkins. She wasn't chosen at first, but she chose herself. If this story moved you, stay with us. We share tales of resilience, love, and second chances every week. Subscribe and let your heart travel a little further next time.